Hiya, folks, we're back. My pal Jimmy, my pal Leon Batts from the Nicky Barnes crew. We'll start off where we left off last. Tony Schuler got arrested, and my whole world is collapsing. And then I get a phone call. I'm in the Concord one night, and the maitre d', Anthony, I think his name was Anthony. He comes to me and he says, "Larry, you got to do me a favor." He says, "There's a couple of my friends outside from the old neighborhood, Harlem, and there's no place for them to sit. There's no rooms. There's no nothing available. The place is packed." The Concord Hotel, it was the largest bar in the world, and I think they held 1,500 people at the bar alone. But I had a table. I had a front table right in front of the bandstand in the lounge. It was the largest lounge in the world. And I always had a table for 6 because of Anthony. And the place was packed. And normally at my table, I had 4 or 5 other girls sitting there, all the beauty queens. They were sitting at the table.
Oh, naturally.
Who else was I going to have sitting there? You? So he come to me and he says, "Would you mind if I sat them at your table?" And I says, "Anthony, if they're friends of yours, they're friends of mine. Bring them down." "Who is it?" "Nicky Barnes, Leon, and 2 of his friends." And they told me that they were up there to see
Natalie Cole.
Natalie Cole.
Natalie Cole.
They were up there to see Natalie Cole's first live performance at the Rolla Hotel. But there were no rooms for them. There was no rooms. It was summertime. There were no rooms, no place. But I had horses with Manny Halbert, who owned the Neville Hotel, and I had horses with Bobby Parker, who owned the Concord Hotel. I had horses with Charles Susky, who owned the Neville Hotel. I had horses with Grosser. I had horses with all the hotel owners. I didn't think that'd be a problem, so I made one phone call and I got them 4 suites, and that was the end of that. So I told them, I said to them, I says, "Listen," I says, after that night was over, I said, we talked. They found out that I had horses at the racetrack and that I was driver, and they says, "When are you racing again?" I said, "I'm racing tomorrow." I says, "In fact, I have a horse in the last race." And that's usually the superfecta race, and I says I usually set that race up every night. He says, "All right, I'll bet for you." I says, "You can't bet. There's no handle there. You can't bet." I says, "You want to come have dinner with me? That's fine, but you can't bet." So, sure enough, they show up at the track. So now, Monica, the maitre d', Monica, she comes down to my table because I had a table right up against the glass because I did a lot of stuff and I had a table up against the glass right at the finish line. Monica comes down. She says, "These 4 black guys upstairs, they just gave me $200 if I could seat them, and they said they were looking for you." And I said, "Just bring them down to the table." So they came down to the table and we had dinner. And then it was time for me to go into the paddock to race. And I told him, I says, "Listen, I hate to say this, but there's no handle here, so don't bet because I already set up this race. You're only going to screw it up for me." So he says, "Listen, after the race, I want to talk to you." So after the race, I met with them. And they told me that they could, this was Nicky Barnes now. He says that he can get down 5,000 a position on any horse. And I says, "Well," I says, "Nicky, that's impossible." I says, "There's no bookmaker in the world going to take 11 by 5,000 a position. They're not going to take no trotting races at all. It's unheard of." I says, "And if you did find one, they're certainly not going to take 5,000 a position, meaning first place and win place and show." And he says, "Larry," he says, "me and my crew, we bet more than $1 million every weekend alone." He says, "They'll give me a courtesy bet of whatever I want." And they're betting with Fat Tony, part of at that time they say he was the boss of the Genovese crew, but anyway. So it turns out to be true.
But it was a one-time thing.
No, it wasn't a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. I thought it might have been a one-time thing because after we made a score, I figured they would shut them down, but they didn't, and they were giving track odds.
Wow.
And so what happened was, I met with Leon. I met with Nicky, and Leon was with him with one or two other guys. I can't remember their names. And they had a garage on, what was it, 125th Street?
45th.
145th
Yeah.
and whatever. In fact,
Lennox Avenue.
Lennox Avenue.
Blocked from Lennox Lane Bowling Alley, actually.
And I think right now you told me that in place of that garage is
Reverend Al Sharpton's headquarters.
headquarters there
Yeah.
now. So the garage is gone, and Sharpton has his headquarters there.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I went down there, he says, okay, he says, here's the number you call, give me the horse and everything else. And that created a problem. And the problem was, first I asked Nicky, I says, who's this kid? Because he was like 20 years younger than us. He was like 20 years old, hanging out with...
I was 21 then. Yeah.
21, hanging out with
old.
Nicky Barnes and that whole crew, that whole council thing that they had. And Nicky Barnes responds to me, he says, who, that boy? He says, that boy? He says, he'd walk through hell with dynamite in his pockets. You don't have to worry about that boy. That's why he's with me. That's him. So anyway, the problem that I had was, it wasn't like before where I can get 3 or 4 horses out of every race and then box the other 3. This was just win, place, and show. So what I had to do then was I had to figure out how to win races rather than leave 4 horses out and just try to guess from the other 4. So I had to just pick winners. So here's what I did to guarantee that I would win. I would switch horses. The guy that and when you race horses, they have an equipment check. A guy that runs around and checks the equipment for each horse, and they check the tattoo numbers to make sure that that's the horse. Well, every time I had a horse in, I went to Ronnie and I says, listen, I give you $500. Just make sure you pass me by.
Right.
And then what I would do is I would put a horse that looks similar.
But he's a ringer.
A ringer. I put a ringer in there. And sometimes I'd have to dye a fetlock or something that was white.
Explain to the folks at home what a ringer is.
A ringer is I would switch horses. A horse that was...
Well, ringer in the boxing would be a person who's a champion, let's say. But to the audience, they wouldn't know that he was a champion, but deep down he was. Same thing with the horse. Continue, Larry. I'm sorry.
That's a terrible analogy. But anyway...
Well, that's where the word ringer comes from.
All right. Well, anyway...
Well, you was basically substitute the winning horse with one of your ringers.
I would substitute
So it would appear,
a bad horse with
for a good horse. So it appears he's a good horse, but really he's...
It appears he's a bad horse, but he's
Yeah.
really a good horse.
And
sometimes I would
he's
have
the double.
to dye a fetlock. I get horses that look similar, and even if I had to buy one for $2,000-3,000, it made no difference. So anyway, that's what I would do, and we were winning money. And every week, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, I would come down to the garage. I would see Leon and Nicky and everything else, and pick up 60, 70, 80, 100,000, whatever it was, and everything was going fine. And to pump up the place prices, I would have some of my friends and family and girls that were with me go to the windows, and everybody knew that they were with me. So whatever, they would hawk them at the windows, and they just bet on the 5 horse. In the meantime, the horse I'm betting on is the 7. But I would have the whole racetrack because they were hawking my guys, and then they would wind up betting the 7 horse, and they would wind up being the favorite, and the horse I'm betting on with Nicky is going up in price. These are all the gimmicks I did. We win a lot of money. And that was going good, and that got me back in good shape again. It got me even helping the cancer people, helping everybody, and helping myself. And everything was great. And then one day, I call up, no answer. And then I find out that they had a raid, and everybody, that whole crew, got arrested. So I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But when I found out they all got arrested, I drove down to the garage, and I go in Nicky's office, and there's 3 black guys sitting there, one behind Nicky's desk. What do you want? I says, my name is Larry Rolla. I was doing something with Nicky, and there should be an envelope in the drawer. We made a bet before this happened, and there should be an envelope in the drawer with, I don't know, maybe 38, 40,000 in it. And he opens the drawer. He takes out a big fucking gun like this. He puts it on the table. And
Let's try not to do them noises.
he puts it on the table. He says, I don't see nothing in here for you. And if I was you, I'd leave. And I says, I think it should be in there. He says, there ain't nothing in here. Unless you want 33 fucking holes in your head, you leave right now. And I said, have a good day. Now, and I left. What happened? You remember what happened? Who'd they round up? Did they get you? I know they got you too. You want to tell a little bit about that?
They basically, they had an informant, of course. They rounded us all up in the dead of night. During the course of a 12-hour period, they locked up, I think it was about 15 of us, they rounded up. The funny thing is they caught me with the winnings from you that I was about to go distribute to the people in the crew. So not only did I get a conspiracy charge, I got this big charge with all this money that's not even mine.
And dirty as hell.
And yeah, and we all carried guns then. Everybody was packing. But I think they kind of gave me a break because I was so young. And I wasn't really known to those. These guys had been in the street for a while. How I got involved was one of Nick's partners was dating my older sister at the time. Because we used to pull jobs. We'd rob jewelry stores, grocery stores, whatever we can get in. And I would go in, I would be the guy to case it because I looked so young. No one really paid a guy attention to his ordering bubble gum and a Pepsi. But really, I'm casing the joint. We would come back for closing and rob it. This one particular store I was going to rob belonged to the guy that was dating my sister that I hadn't met yet, who happened to be Nicky Barnes' lieutenant. Long story short, we were really raising hell in the Bronx and in Harlem with these stores, and the store owners went to those guys and like, listen, we don't know the neighborhood like you guys do. They got a crew of young men that's like really giving us the business with these stores. They put the word out, put a reward out. I got called to my mom's house one day. My mom sent for me. I go in, and these 2 big guys you described are sitting in my mother's living room. I've never seen them before, but I can just tell that they're like some really menacing characters. So I'm like, oh shit, I think I'm in a little soup here. My sister comes out, calls me in the kitchen. She says, so you've been running around robbing people, huh? And I didn't want to lie. I would never lie to her. I said, yeah, something like that. I've been kind of running around the crew. She said, well, a couple of those stores you robbed belonged to those guys sitting in here. Where's the money? I mean, we would jerk the money, going to Coney Island, going to clubs, basement gambling holes, just jerk the money. We was kids. We didn't know anything about the value of $1. We would just go get some more tomorrow, spend it the next day. Long story short, I get introduced to Jazz, and Jazz says, you're going to work in my store.
Jazz is one of the guys in the council in that home.
Yeah, he's one of the, at that time I didn't know. I mean, we would hear their names in the neighborhood, but I never really knew who they were. We all knew who Nicky Barnes was and Big Robbie was and Pee Wee Kirkland and all those guys. We knew their names, but we never had no interaction with them until that particular time. I think one time something came up. I really don't know what the story is, but they all came to my mother's house and they had all these bags, and they're like, look, take this to Scrap's room. When he comes in, tell him to watch these bags, don't look in them. So, of course, now knowing who they are, I'm like, damn, I hope it ain't no legs, arms, or heads in these freaking in these bags that I'm babysitting. So I'm wound up sitting on these bags for about 10 days. The reality of that, they were testing me to see could I be trusted. So they came and took me for a ride, got the bags, put them in the car. Said, did you look in the bags? I said, no, I didn't look in the bag. They said, you sure you didn't look in them bags? I said, no, I was instructed not to look in the bags. I didn't look at them. It was nothing but trash in the bags. Bricks, books, bottles, some you lift, they would jingle, like it was chains, some were heavy. But I never looked in the bags, so that was like my test to get in. There was some other tests down the road, but I'll leave those stories out. But the long story short is, I was like was the youngest guy that was in that crew. When I got in, I met them in '72, and we got busted. I think the first time was '77.
How much time
76.
did you get for that?
The first time was what was called a contempt conspiracy. I did like 2 years, you know. Then when I came home, that's when Nick went bad and we all went to jail.
I wound up doing 7 years with Frank James.
Yeah. Frank was one of the council members. It was Frank, Wallace Rice, Frank James, Ishmael Muhammad, Guy Fisher, Thomas Foreman, and I think I'm leaving somebody out. Oh, and Nick and Jazz, of course. Nick and Jazz.
They're all dead now, right? Right, except for one or two of them.
Well, Frank died. Frank died in prison.
Frank died in jail. Thomas Foreman died. I think he was home a year when he passed. Basically, they're all deceased. Nicky died in 2012. We didn't know. You know, they kind of kept that quiet until maybe a couple of years ago. He died in 2012. Guy Fisher just got released after 38 years, and I speak to him currently. He's in and out of consciousness. He's still stuck in his 70s. When he's coherent, he's demented.
Is he really that?
Yeah, it's really bad. It's
Who's
really
worse,
bad.
him or Jazz? Because I know
And
Jazz
Jazz is non-ambulatory, so he's bedridden now.
Jeez.
Yeah, he just kind of stares at the wall.
I got to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that thing that you did. They did some kind of documentary about Nicky Barnes.
Untouchable.
Yeah, you narrated that whole thing. It was a good show. You did a good job. But tell me why did Nicky Barnes, if you want to say it, why did Nicky Barnes become a government informant? He said it was because they were messing around with his girlfriend, the guy you just mentioned, Guy. But is that the real story, or,
No.
or could you?
Funny story. Before all of that happened, there was a guy that Nick had was partners with, like early on in his criminal career, maybe early '70s or '60s, that Nick told on. None of us knew this. So, you know, now Nick is Nick, and he's the big guy, he's the big dog, he's the boss. And this guy kept coming around looking for him. And Nick would duck him. We never really wondered why. I mean, go up to Nick and say, hey man, this guy's looking for you, why you don't want to talk to him? Whatever the reason was, you left it at that. The guy wanted some money from Nick. He's trying to, some hush money. So Nick met him. He had me meet him. Say, Nick told me to give you this. He said, let me tell you something, young blood. Remember these words. He said that motherfucker's not made, exact words, that motherfucker's not made out of what you think he's made out of. And when shit get tight, he's gonna fold on all of y'all. So
That's
of course.
Nicky Barnes he was talking about?
Yeah, so of course, I'm like, what? Yeah, all right. So next day I go back and I tell them, tell them what the guy said. I said, yo, this guy says, you ain't made out of shit. Of course, he was insulted. And like, if I ever uttered them words again, then I would get my just desserts.
His other incentive was to hide his money too, right?
Yeah, well, that's what it was. That girl, that wasn't his wife to begin with. Everyone keeps thinking about.
What was her name?
Thelma.
Thelma?
Thelma wasn't his wife. Wife's name was Sister. I knew his wife very well. She lived in Chicago. She would fly back and forth to New York. But that was his wife. Thelma wasn't his wife. Thelma actually was the girlfriend of the guy that Nick wanted to kill. It was his girlfriend first. And she's a go-go dancer. Very beautiful, I must say, but she was a go-go dancer. So they going back and forth over this chick.
Didn't one of them get killed? Was that?
Well, the girlfriend that got killed, Shemeka, was a friend of mine. We grew up together. Me and our families all came out the same neighborhood. She was killed to keep Nick quiet about. He was mad at Guy. He wanted to have Guy killed over that girl. There was always some women involved. Those are all his cover stories. He had every intention of ratting once he knew that he was in, because he tried to set us up before.
Nicky did?
Yeah, he tried to set us up before. And unfortunately, Frank took the bait. That's how Frank wound up in jail. Because he went at this guy, a candy man, we called him. Wallace came home. You know, Wallace was like a very important part of the council too. And Wallace had already had everything set up for us to go back into business. And Nick kept sending word like he wanted them to meet this guy, meet this guy, meet this guy. And Wallace like, no, we cool. We're going to take care of you. Don't worry about nothing. We got it. I'm home now. But somehow Frank and Nick were like the closest. So Frank would always do Nick's bidding. So Frank goes to meet the undercover agent, and he tells Wallace to take a ride with him. Yeah, just take a ride with me. I got to go meet some folks. So Wallace is sitting in the car going to meet this guy who happens to be wired up and is an informant, and they're making a deal instructed by Nick. Frank agrees to the terms, agrees to the deal, and once he walks out, the feds prance back down
That's
on
the guy
him.
you were in jail with?
Frank James,
Yes, Frank
yeah.
James, yes.
Yeah. So Wallace was home 8 months before he gets turned around, and we all wound up going back doing all of that time. He's home now, older, quieter.
So
Just not the
Nicky
same.
Barnes was really not the guy portrayed by everyone.
Nicky Barnes was a fucking coward that ratted on his friend. Excuse my French. But that's basically
Made
what he
Frank
was.
die in jail. Frank
died in jail. Brother died in jail. Guy lost his mind in jail. Wallace is a cripple. Jazz is bedridden. I think the only one came out of that unscathed was me, because I believe in the power of prayer. So I prayed every day. If once I got out of this situation, I would get out of this life, and that's what I've done.
Well,
ever
I know.
since I've been home.
I want to ask you one other question. Was Nicky bigger in Harlem than that other black guy? What the hell is his name?
Lucas?
Lucas, yeah.
Yeah.
He was bigger than Lucas?
Yeah, and Nick, we were all over the country. I mean, as far as Harlem was home base, but Nick, I think I would say the only guy that I would think would be larger than Nick was Frank Matthews. Frank Matthews was...
You think he's still alive? They say that he might still be alive someplace.
Frank Matthews?
Yeah.
This is what I believe. For you to be that big, you have to be in bed with the feds. To get away with all of that crap, you got to be in. You did something down the line to earn their favor. And I think he got so big, he decided like he didn't need them anymore, need their protection, and they made him disappear. That's just my theory.
That kind of makes sense, because the whole world, it's like him and two mysteries. Him and
Jimmy Hoffa.
Jimmy Hoffa. Two things. Nobody.
Exactly.
Nobody knows
I
what
mean, how
happened.
do you make somebody that's well known, that exposed, that everybody in the world knows you, all of a sudden you're just totally going off the planet? Who has that kind of power?
Just so you guys know, who was that kid that was making the movie that put up his company put up $100 million? The kid that slapped the guy during the.
Oh, you're talking about Will Smith.
Will Smith.
Yeah.
Will Smith's company was making a movie
Overstock.
called
Overbrook.
That
Overbrook.
was going to be the
that
name
was
of
the
the
name
movie?
of the company.
No,
Will
the
Smith's
name of the
company.
movie was going to be The Council.
Yeah, the council. Yeah.
And they hired
Yeah, I was the
Leon here
consultant.
to be
Yeah.
the consultant for the movie,
Yeah.
and everything was going fine till he wound up smacking
The slap
that guy.
heard around the world.
Yeah, the slap heard around the world, and that was the end of that. That might still come about. I think didn't a writer or something? What was
Yeah, one of the guys that's involved in the project, we in contact all the time, and he says basically now that it's all kind of died down. You know, all the jokes has been had, all the blogs has been had, everybody's read about it. It's like really old news. It should be developing again, but I don't know what it is. It's like some kind of black cloud over this, because as soon as we make some progress, something happens. Like now, there's a writer's strike.
Yeah.
So there's no.
And
no
speaking about the
production going
writer's
out.
strike, I don't know if he wants to talk about it, but he has 4 kids. Leon has 4 kids.
Yeah.
I met them all.
4 boys. Yeah.
Unbelievable talents, all of them in their field. And one of them is Noel. His name backwards. That's how I remember his name.
Yeah.
And he's a young kid, screenwriter, already made, wrote, directed, starred, everything in his own movies.
Yeah.
Produced.
This is movie number 3. Short stories, videos. He's done them all. He's won several awards, Writers Guild awards.
His next project, he told me, was going to be his life story, because he's really the only one left of that whole council. In fact, he's the only one left out of our whole Harlem crew down there. But he's 1 or 2 that are still alive, but they're incoherent. So you're really the only one. But his kids, especially this one kid that I know very well, Noel. He's a brilliant kid, and the only reason he's not here today is because he's married with a kid and it's Mother's Day, and so he couldn't come. He's a brilliant kid. You put out some good stuff.
Yeah, I've been blessed. He's a good kid. Finished school, graduated degree in journalism, and got into writing, doing small little 30-minute like YouTube videos and stuff like that. And a lot of his stuff is coming of age movies. That's the big thing for him. You know, coming through trials and tribulations. My story is kind of a new challenge for him. I wasn't interested in doing it because I really just wanted to put that part of my life completely in my rearview mirror. But he's like, Dad, you gotta the way you came up. I mean, I came up through, I'm not bragging, but I came up through a family of criminals. You know, my dad was bootlegger, my mother ran card games and cooked. My brothers were into some kind of vice, some kind of crime. So I came up in that environment, you know. That's why I got my education in the street. But I didn't want that for my kids.
Maybe I could work for Mom one day with the cards.
Yeah. So I didn't want that for my kids. So they all, with me, school was it. School was their way out. No matter what it was going to cost, I was going to make sure it got paid for. But you're going to school. And all of my kids graduated from college.
Wow.
And all of my kids have great careers. So I've been blessed with that.
That's good.
I got to ask you. I was listening to a podcast. I forgot whose podcast it was because I don't watch television too much because of all the political bullshit. It's the same. I can't handle it no more. So I go on YouTube, and I've been listening to all of these guys, and I get a little frustrated because most of the stories that are being told from all of these guys, I already know, or I lived through them, or I've been a part of, but one guy mentioned a name. I think it was John Panisi. I can't remember. Anyway, they mentioned that they were in jail with a guy called Green, and that was
Green on Green.
Green on Green.
Yeah, that's my buddy.
Because you put me on the phone with him during the pandemic.
That was actually Robbie's right hand man. Nick and Robbie were partners.
When I says, tell me more.
Gene was his name.
Gene Green.
Gene Green. They called him Green on Green.
Right.
Because he always wear green. He always drove a green Cadillac. He was just green on green.
Do you know that I bought a brand new Cadillac that was green, and I pulled into his courthouse where a lot of my wise guy friends in the Bronx stayed, and I pulled up. I went upstairs, and there was Nicky and Joey. And whose car is that?
Money green Cadillac.
I says, it's mine. Get it out of here. I didn't get it. I just bought it. Get it the fuck out of here. I found out that Italian mob guys don't want green cars.
Yeah.
Get it out of here. But anyway, the reason I wanted to get in touch with Greenie was because very few people except you, I could never find out any information. Because of all of them guys that I met, the two most interesting ones was not Nicky Barnes, it was Robbie. So I asked, you told me, here's Greenie's phone number. Call Greenie because he was with him all the time. I was a lot younger.
Yeah.
So I called Greenie, and it was during when everybody had to wear a mask and everything. And I says, can you tell me? He says, Robbie was the man. He says, fuck Nicky Barnes. Robbie was the man. And that's as much as I know. So I says, can we meet and have dinner? And he was scared to death of
Because of the pandemic.
getting COVID.
Yeah.
And he says, after this is over, I'll call you and we'll meet and everything else. And I never did that. And the reason I never did it was because right after that, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. I got an offer when I wrote the book from Village Roadshow, Sony Productions, Village Roadshow, and they wind up signing it took us 6 months to make the contract, but they were going to do a TV series or a movie about me into a TV series, and we were all set to go. They flew up from California. We met. The writers were going to be Nicholas Pileggi, Richard Price, and Ed Burns, that actor, writer, Ed Burns. And Village Roadshow is, I think it's the largest distribution of film in the country.
Lionsgate, Village Roadshow, they're big out there.
They deal with 180 countries around the world.
Yeah.
And it took us 6 months to do the contract and everything, and then we had this big meeting, and then there was a private meeting with me and Nicholas Pileggi and Richard Price, and they were all excited about just starting this whole thing, and we were going to start writing, and then all of a sudden the COVID hit, and everything got shut down. Richard Price went into hibernation. It was just everything got shut down. And they called me 2 years later, which was just recently, well, 6 months, 8 months ago, whenever it was, and they says, your option ran out, we'd like to re-sign you. And I said, I'll give you another option for 16 months if you start my story right away. And he says, we can't promise that because when we shut down, we're right in the middle of some major projects and on and on and on and on. And I says, well, I'm not going to resign. And then right after that, I got a phone call from Nick and Frank Vallelonga, the kids that wrote the Green Book, the movie The Green Book. They won the Academy Award and 4 or 5 other awards. And they read my book, and they wanted to do the movie, and they were very, very interested. And when they found out that I knew their father, who the Green Book was about, he was the maitre d'. I met him when I used to go to Copa almost every night when the father was the maitre d', him and Carmine. Then they really wanted to. So they flew into New Jersey, and they were doing a movie here called Amore with the guy who does the dancing. What's that guy's name?
Travolta.
John Travolta. and so Nick had to go back to California for a couple of weeks. So Frank called me up and he says, Larry, you mind if I stay with you? Because when Frank flew in first, I picked him up at the airport. He wound up staying in my house. I had plenty of room there. And we got along well for the couple of weeks he was there. So he says, my brother's going to California. Can I stay with you and rather than stay here by myself? And I said, sure. He says, okay, I'll be there tomorrow night. So that was Monday night. So Monday night comes, you don't show up. So Tuesday I call him, no answer. Wednesday I call him, no answer. And Thursday, I got a phone call that they found Frank dead in the Bronx, and what happened was it was in all the newspapers.
I remember
he
that.
picked up a hooker, and they got some cocaine laced with fentanyl, and they found him dead. And the sad part is that the hooker robbed all his money and credit cards and all his information. She took off. About an hour later, they find this homeless guy come, and they see this guy dead in the car, and he drags him out, leaves him in the street, and robs the car. And the reason it took 2-3 days to find him was because the hooker had all this identification, and they found him through the building that they were parked on that had cameras, and they got the license plate number and everything, and that's how they found him. So now, naturally, the brother is devastated and everything else, and he halts everything. We go to the wake and everything else, and I'm sitting with him, everybody, all the movie stars were there and everything. And after the wake was over, we go to the repass, and at the repass, he comes over to me and he says, here's my personal cell number. He says, we're going to get to your thing. But I have to go. I need time. And there's no problem. So he leaves, and I was never going to call him until he called me. This is devastation. I don't know what it's like because I never witnessed that. I just lost my mother and father, and maybe it was in a different way, but it's devastating, and I'm not good at that stuff. So next thing I know, I'm waiting. I get a phone call from, what the hell was his name? Barry O'Brien. He's the writer for Law and Order. And a friend of mine, John McCormick, gave him one of my books. And he wanted to meet with me. So I go down to Greenpoint where they're filming all that stuff, and I met with him, and he says, I think there should be a TV series. I'm very interested. I want to do it. He says, in Law and Order, the writing for Law and Order, and my job stops right the last week in April. He says, so in May, we'll fly down to LA, and I'll use all my connections with the networks and the companies and the streaming services. I've been doing this for 40 years, had a lot of hit shows and everything. So he's got a great resume, knows everybody. He says, and we'll get this thing done, and we'll start writing the TV series. Well, guess what? He didn't die, but the writer's strike happened. So now we have to wait out this writer's strike, which might take a long time, because now it's just not plain negotiations with they want more money for this. Now it's the whole streaming services, and it gets very, very
Everything's
involved.
in jeopardy now. Yeah.
So now what we're doing to kill time is this. This is what we're doing. So I'll tell my story very, very briefly as leading into that. In the meantime, we'll have some fun doing it. And the viewers just gonna have to excuse my memory, my going through the things, and occasionally dribbling. So that's
No drilling on the camera.
that's
No, not allowed.
I can't help it. When you get old, things just happen. The
Yeah.
hair grows where it never grew before, and
So
things happen. And,
We'll file this under T for it to be continued.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly. Really could use you back at that racetrack right about now.
I
Got my kids through college.
I would love to be there, and this might be a great reason. I wrote this because I get so mad sometimes because my whole life was destroyed, and every time I write things down, I sit there. Especially I have nothing to do. I don't work, and I just get bitter. I just get bitter, and I keep writing little bits down, and with the help of Sharman, who's Alfred's wife, who helped me write the book and helped me doing this whole thing because I knew nothing about it, and it's all her friends that are doing this. And she's an extremely talented person. She's married to probably my best friend, Alfred Natoli, who is Joe Pesci's double, and if this ever gets made into a movie, both of them, including you, will be in the series and anything I have anything to do with in order to help. So, but because you said about the horses, I'm gonna read this. This I wrote a long time ago, and if I rewrote it or gave it to Sharman to rewrite, I'm sure the English would be a whole lot better. But here goes. There is no doubt that I broke some rules, especially the Racing Commission's #1 rule, which is protecting the betting public. Because of that rule, I was falsely accused a long time ago and barred from racing for life with no recourse, which sent me into a downhill spiral. Frank Sinatra sang a song called Street of Dreams. The first few lines in that song are, "Kings don't mean a thing on the street of dreams." Well, that's what the Racing Commission took from me, my dream. I don't follow any kings. I don't follow anybody. I follow my dreams, and that's what they took away. And that's why I'm mad, and that's why I'm bitter. I'd like to ask a couple of questions to all the Racing Commission political appointees who are put, in most cases, into positions of total incompetence, yet they're the ones who write the rules. My question would be, who protects the owners and trainers that work and pay to put on the show for the betting public and the ones that pay your salaries? The answer is no one. And there's two reasons for that. The first one is they are so far behind in every area to the ones that found the edge. The second one is their total incompetence. The racetrack owners and commissioners are licensed by the same commission as myself. So why aren't they ever held responsible for any decision they make, especially their number one rule, which is protecting the betting public? As an example, I can give many. Who protects the betting public? When a horse wins. Now this is an example that really happened, and it recently happened, and it happened many, many times before. And here it goes. A horse wins, and 3 days later he comes up with a positive test. The commission then disqualifies that horse, and the purse money that horse got to win is taken away and given to the horse that finished second. Who is then declared the winner? So in other words, the horse that won, the people that bet on him collected the money. 3 days later, that horse come up with a positive test. The commission takes the purse money away from that, gives it to the horse that finished second, who is then declared the winner. But who pays the betting public that ripped their tickets up after the race was made official because they bet on the horse that finished second? So I don't know if you can understand this, but the racing committee, and I think I say it here. I think I say it right here.
Oh, no, I'm following along perfectly. Horse A won, but he's found to be dirty.
Right.
So horse B, who came in second, is now
The winner.
Horse A. But everybody who bet on horse A
Already collected the money, and the
Right.
ones that bet on horse B, who was after the fact
Right.
declared the winner, their tickets ripped
Their
up.
tickets are no
If you're
gone,
gonna
so they
protect
can't
the
be
betting
compensated.
okay.
Yeah.
So I
But there's
think
but there's no money for them to get anyway.
Well,
Well,
if horse B was declared, well, they won second place. Say they won place, right? So
No,
they win place show. So say they bet place, they were compensated. They never bet on horse A to
Let me
win.
read it, because I think I got the answer here. The answer is nobody pays the guys who ripped their tickets up.
Right.
The reason is because of the total incompetence of the racing commission to stop the cheating and drugging prior to the race. In other words, had the racing commission did their job, that
Before
horse
the race,
never would
right.
have been tested positive, because they would have tests to prove it, and they would have stopped it
It would have
before
been
it happened.
scratched.
And no, I'm not. Scratching has nothing to do with it. If the racing commission had the rules in place and the proper testing in place to catch any drugs that are administered to a horse or anything administered to a horse, that could never happen. So if that could never happen, the winner would still be the winner. The people that bet on the winner would still, and they would be nobody that ripped up tickets because the horse that finished second. It's confusing, and I'm not sure if horse people could understand that. Okay, but now. I guess you understand it. It's very confusing. But anyway, here's another
So
example.
basically, you're saying there's no regulation where they can find all this out before the race.
What I'm saying, if the racing commission wasn't full of incompetent people, they would have testing in place where nobody would get through the pre-race test.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, nobody would be disqualified for a post-race test. So the winner would be the winner because all the tests would be clean. And that's if the racing commission was competent and had all of these things in place. Now, here's another example, and this involves me, and it's funny. Based on commission rules, racetrack owners who are also licensed by the same commission are responsible for keeping undesirables out of the racetrack. So let me tell you what happened. I was an undesirable because I was barred from Yonkers Raceway. So now, and the owners of the racetrack, which at that time were the Rooneys, they have the responsibility to keep all mobsters, all undesirables out of the racetracks. That's part of their rules. And if they're found guilty of that, they lose their license. Okay, so here's what happens. I'm barred, but I have a horse to bet at Yonkers Racetrack. So I sneak into, I have a date. I take the date. I says, I don't know if we're going to get in or not, but I get in. I go up to the dining room, and I'm sitting at the dining room, I'm having dinner. Now, I'm sitting facing this way, the girl I'm with facing me, and who comes down the steps? John Gotti and 3 of his guys. Now, I had called John. I'll get into John Gotti a little later because I had a horse with him. I'll get into that story at another time. But I first met John Gotti when we were kids. I was 17 years old, and I had robbed 3 trail loads of Cutty Sark whiskey, and I had to get rid of them. And John Gotti knew a guy that had a catering hall, and we wound up selling him, and I gave him a piece of the action. So I met John when we were kids. We lived in the same neighborhood. I lived in Jackson Heights and Corona. He lived right down the street. So, but I'll get into that whole John Gotti thing at some other time. So anyway, down the steps, we're in the dining room. John Gotti's coming down with 3 of his guys. He comes by. Hi, Larry. Hi, John. He goes down. He sits down. Now I'm looking at the racetrack. John Gotti's sitting 2 or 3 levels down, and there's big glass, separating the outside from the inside. And you could see from the glass, you could see the reflection up above. I see 4 or 5 guys. So I say to the girl I'm with, I says, watch this. I says, you see in that, I says, don't turn around, but look in the glass. You see them men on the railing up there? They're probably commissioned, state police, FBI, whatever. They're going to come, and that's John Gotti. Okay, here they come. Just keep eating. They stop at my table. You Larry Rolla? Yeah. Come with me. Oh, can I finish eating? Come with me. Can I pay the check? Come with me. And they threw me out. They left John Gotti there. Good for him, but it's just unbelievable that John Gotti's crew could stay, but me, who was falsely accused of something, got to go. And that's why. And I have a lot more stories and a lot more situations like that. But anyway, that's the end of my rant. We could probably shut this down now. Is there anything else you want to say? You want to say anything more about the guy who was, is there anything more you want to say about your kids, about your upcoming...
I can't wait till this is into a movie because from the time that I come by the house and sit with you, I really enjoy listening to these stories.
Well, I'll tell you, your son, Noel...
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he's going to turn this. Yeah,
Here's the problem we have now. Noel, in fact, he just mentioned it. He has somebody interested put up $10 million to do a movie. He probably get more, but right now that's what he has to do, a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's now, because I made them one, because I would never do anything without Noel. Barry O'Brien, the writer for Who Wants to Do the TV series,
Law and Order guy.
I put them together because I'll never shut either one of them out. So now they're going to work together, and it might turn out, if the writer's strike is ever over and everybody stays alive, it might turn out to be a movie that's turned into a TV series. And I just hope everybody remembers that I'm not 20 years old. All these other guys, I'd like to see. But every time something happens, a disaster happens where like this is never supposed to happen. But I hope it happens. So that's it. If nobody else has anything to say, I'm tired. And
well, if they have any questions, you can always hit like, subscribe.
Yeah, that's another thing. And I said it in the beginning. If I left out so much. There's so much I left out, and hopefully that what I did leave out in the earlier podcast, we could fill in with your questions. So please, there's an email in this someplace on the screen. Just send the email and we'll answer any of your questions.
And if you do like what you people see out there, please hit like and subscribe.
And that
Good book.
That's it. So, the book is 85,000 words. That's what they told me, and each chapter in that book is probably 1% of the real story, and that's the reason for the TV series. Because even Nicholas Pileggi said, and Richard Price, there's just too much. There's just too much material for it to be a movie.
Hey,
and
would you look at that? Who's this guy?
That's you.
Man, look at this handsome young man right there.
We have a better picture that we're gonna put up.
Oh my God.
It's with you and Nicky. In fact, we have a couple of
I
pictures.
couldn't even grow a mustache back then. Look at this.
You were just a kid, and I'll never forget with Nicky. And that has to be a compliment. That when he says that boy walked through hell with dynamite in his pockets.
Gasoline draws.
Now, I ain't going to ask you how you got the name Scrap, and I ain't going to ask you if you killed anybody, and I ain't going to ask you what you did. All I know is that you're home, you're my friend, and we have stories to tell, and you're on the right track now. You have a wonderful family, and you too, Jimmy. You too.
Thank
You're
you.
getting a little heavy, but you're a good
Well,
guy.
that's what fine dining we have right here on premises.
Yeah.
Anyway, what else you want to say? You want to say something?
No, I'm just enjoying everything. And
me too. And
I'm
it's a
here for the
pleasure
ride.
to meet you, Jimmy.
Pleasure to
We'll
meet
see
you,
each
Leon.
other soon.
All right.
Again.
We're going to get something to eat. See you. See you next week.
Bye-bye, everybody.